bringing you in-depth discussion from one of the most read group of online writers covering the Edmonton Oilers. Are you ready for Oilers Overtime? Join us as we talk news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and more, all featured on one of the most glorified teams in the NHL, from the great one to the next one, from the boys on the bus to the decade of darkness. This is Oilers Overtime.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. My name is Jim Parsons. I'm going to be your host for this evening. As we do every week, we've got most of our panel back. Colton's not with us this week. He had other things that he had to take care of, probably a little bit more important. So we'll give him a pass, but we've got Julian Mongillo back with us. Julian, how are you?
What's up, guys? Good to be back on another episode, another fresh week, and still enjoying that playoff hockey. So it's all good.
And for those of you that are listening to this only on audio, he just sort of gave us the surfer, whatever that is. I don't know what
Cowabunga,
that is.
you know?
Yeah, I'm not cool enough to know what that really is called. And Brian Swane is with us. Brian, how are you?
Yeah, I don't know what that was either. That's I guess past my time. But anyway, yeah, no, I'm good. Good to be with you guys too.
I'm pretty sure I saw like an after school special one time when I was like 16 years old where they did that, and that was still really cool. So it had some sort of meaning, and it was good enough. I mean, it's awesome. But we're going to talk about defense this week, because last week we talked about the offense and maybe what the Edmonton Oilers can do, what their plans might be, sort of thing. So we're going to tackle the blue line this time around. Julian, I'm going to start with you. Before we get into any changes, before we get into any, what's the plan for Ken Holland, let's appreciate what we did see this past season, and it starts and ends really with Darnell Nurse. Here's a guy who, if he isn't in the Norris Trophy conversation, we probably should all wonder where the candidates are coming from. What do you think of Nurse's season? What does it say to you about what's going to happen here with him moving forward? How much should we be appreciating the season he just had?
Well, it was great to see him kind of break out onto the scene like that finally, and really assert himself, I think, as that dominant blue liner that I think the Oilers really have been lacking and really needing for the past couple of years. So it was finally good to see him be able to take the reins and just eat minutes in all situations, throw him out there, just a complete workhorse on the back end there. And I think it was great to see him evolve and mentor some of the younger guys like Ethan Bear and some of the other younger guys on the blue line. I think that he has to be in the consideration for the Norris. I think he would be at least a top 5 candidate. He's right up there. I'm not sure how he's if he'll win, just because there's still guys like Victor Hedman there, and even what Cale Makar did in a limited amount of games. I think he had a point per game pace even despite his injury. So I think going forward, those young guys, even Adam Fox and Cale Makar, and it might be like a little hard to get over seasons like they've had. But if Nurse can get some power play time, and he was on power play 2 because Barry occupied power play 1. So if Barry doesn't come back, I think that increase in minutes on the power play could be the difference of him being a Norris finalist.
Brian, you took a look at him specifically and why he should be in the Norris Trophy conversation. What were some of the major points that you pointed out as to why he needs to be in that conversation?
Yeah, I think I guess I'll start off by saying it was more on articles up now, but it was more about why that he had a Norris caliber season. I don't think he's going to get a nomination this year, just because, I mean, the competition is that stiff this year. Victor Hedman, Adam Fox, Cale Makar, Charlie McAvoy, even got guys like, in the conversation, like Jeff Petrie is probably in there too. So there's so many guys you can make a good case for, but he had what I feel was at least a Norris caliber season with what he did. He did it at both ends of the ice. Obviously, we know what he did offensively. The guy scored 16 goals in 56 games, 15 of them even strength. And we just heard Julian talk about what he could do if he got some more time on the power play. Well, if you're a defenseman who's scoring 15 goals at even strength, I mean, that's just, it was first in the NHL. And it was a historic pace by Oilers standards. So I thought he was just tremendous. Both ends of the ice defensively, I thought he played with a lot more calm and composure. We saw a lot less errors. I just think he was a lot more under control. I think if you see him personally too, and I've talked a little bit about this, how off the ice, I know his fiance gave birth to their first child, the season. I think we're seeing he's really growing up a lot, and I think that's reflected in his game. And then what do we say about the minutes that he eats up? I mean, the guy played over an hour in the triple overtime game against Winnipeg. I mean, he can go, you almost think that you could put him out there for half an hour, half the game, 30 minutes every game in the season, and he wouldn't get tired. I mean, he's just relentless. So all these things, I think, just really add up. And I'm a big fan of the guy, and I think I don't expect him to get his Norris nomination this year, but he's at that level now. He's a legit number one defenseman. I think we can all say that. And when was the last time we could say that about anybody? We thought we might have had one here with Adam Larsson, and Adam Larsson had a terrific season, but I don't even know if he's quite at that level, like where you could just say, yeah, this guy's a number one. He's going to get paid like a number one coming up here next season too.
Yeah, I mean, Adam Larsson probably isn't in that conversation. Oscar Klefbom probably isn't even in that conversation, even though the Oilers had played him like he was a number one defenseman for a long time. But you're right. What is so impressive about Darnell Nurse is not just the minutes that he eats, and he's not going to get credit for that 62 whatever minute game in overtime because that doesn't go in or isn't supposed to tally into the Norris Trophy candidacy. But people were really starting to see what Darnell, like those that don't follow the Oilers really closely, got to learn a lot more about Darnell Nurse from that playoff series because that guy, he played constantly. He played tough minutes. He played, in all situations. Outside of the power play, and like you guys both pointed out, can you imagine the amount of minutes he would have eaten if he had gotten first unit power play time? Like, I don't know how many minutes you want to give him, but I mean, who knows what that would have equated to. So yeah, he certainly should be in the conversation. I would probably more lean to, I would be a little disappointed if he wasn't in there. But you are right. There's a lot of guys that are going to get, consideration. There's really only 3 that you can kind of put in there. So you're going to make the argument either way. If Adam Fox isn't in there or McAvoy's not in there, or whoever's not in there, why they should be. And Darnell is just in that conversation. What do you think, Julian, I'll start with you. What do you think it means for his future contract? Now, here's a guy who's got one more year before he's bound to get a very, very big, handsome raise. One, what do you think that contract maybe looks like if you could kind of predict where you think it's going to go? And 2, how does it change what the Oilers do for the next things we're about to talk about, where they go with this blue line?
In my opinion, he's got to be paid like a number one. So I would assume he's going to, if they want to lock him in on term, it's going to have to be probably in the maybe 6 to 7 year, maybe 8 to 9 million. I would say at least 8 million. I think you would probably have a good starting point there, depending on the term. But yeah, I think he's just proven that he can do it at all times. So, you see, I think the importance of having a guy like that on the blue line is, especially for a team that hasn't had one in such a while, the need is so big that they'll almost pay him whatever they need to do to keep him. And moving forward, I don't see a way that, I mean, every other team kind of has that number one, and they still usually pair him with a second tier guy or something like that. So I think they still are missing that second tier piece, especially if Klefbom can't come back. And same with Barriet as well. So I'm not sure they'll probably still be in the mix to add another piece to pair him with. But I think there's still some good free agents that they can attempt to go after, and maybe an offensive defenseman to put beside him, similar to what Barry could do. I don't know if Barry will fit in just because of the money he might command after the season he had, but I think there's some options that they can go after and try and fill that void.
Brian, I'm hearing the numbers that there's kind of prematurely being tossed out there, like 8 times 8 for a guy like Darnell Nurse, right? Would you hesitate at all to give him that right away? Would you want to wait a season and see what he does, and just to make sure he can repeat the performance he had? Like if he has another season like he just had, that's an easy no-brainer, 8 times 8, good to go, right? Like no big deal. But if he doesn't do that, what happens if you sign him as soon as you can to that sort of a deal? Do you want to wait 1 year and see can he repeat that performance? Or is there a risk in doing that and going, man, we don't want to go more than 8 times 8? Do you like that number? What would you do if you're Ken Holland in this situation?
So you're saying, should they extend him this offseason?
Well, they can't yet, but I think it's like going to be July 1st or something.
Yeah.
The minute they can start talking to him about a future contract, they probably will. And maybe you want to look at getting that done prior to another really, really, really strong season where he plays even more minutes. Maybe he does get first play power play time. And then he's like, okay, now I'm a $9-10 million defenseman. I don't know that that's going to happen in a flat cap because we're probably still looking at a flat cap when his contract comes around. But I don't know, like 8x8 seems okay if he can repeat this, but if he ups it, if he does even better, what's he worth at that point?
If he ups it, he's worth whatever they would pay him. I mean, it would be nice to get him for, $1 million or two less per, if they could, let's say they extend him for 8x8 this year and he goes out and plays amazing, he would be worth 8x10 in the market next year. But if he's, this team has not had a defenseman that has played at his level since Chris Pronger. And before that, it was probably Paul Coffey. Like, we're talking literally one defenseman in the last 30 years, 35 plus years that's played like this guy. That's how hard it is to get this kind of guy. So whatever you have to pay, whenever you have to do it, and if that means extending him this offseason, I mean, Holland is going to have to. There's a lot of factors to consider, and I think you touched on a lot already there, Jim. With the what is the cap? Is the cap going to stay flat? Is it going to go up? What's the risk of him upping his value? And do they feel confident that, if they say, okay, we're just going to let you play out this season, we'll get it done next off season, we'll pay you whatever you're worth. Are they afraid that there is a risk of losing him on the market? So I think the other point too, we saw this with Nugent Hopkins. When you go into that contract year and a guy has it hanging over his head and there's all the question marks surrounding it, sometimes that can weigh on them and it can have a huge impact. Nugent Hopkins is a perfect example. So I think that's an important fact to consider with respect to maybe getting it done this offseason.
Yeah, I'm going to look up the exact date and try to find out when they're actually eligible to sign him again. But it is an interesting question. Like, what do? You want him. You certainly don't want to lose him. Everything you hear about him is that he's a true through and through Oiler, doesn't want to go anywhere else, is really tight with McDavid, really tight with Draisaitl. This is the core that you want to keep together. And you build the entire team around these three, right? So I think you want to pay whatever it's going to take to keep him. But at the same time, if you can find a way to get the best value out of him that you possibly can, knowing you're going to sign him for 7 or 8 years, it's certainly worth taking a look at and just seeing what your options are. Okay, let's move on a little bit from Darnell Nurse because we know he's not going anywhere. We know the Oilers aren't going to get rid of him. What would you do with the 2 UFA defensemen, Julian, that we're probably looking at only being able to keep one of? So if you're the Edmonton Oilers and your general manager, Ken Holland, do you kind of focus on Adam Larsson? Is he your priority? Do you focus on Tyson Barriet? Is he your priority? We've heard that Adam Larsson's probably pretty close, that things are not that far from being done, but we have also heard that Tyson Barriet is going to chest free agency, and it's 50-50 at best that he makes it back to the Oilers. What would be your priority if you're Holland, and which defenseman would you choose to focus on?
My priority would probably be Adam Larsson. I would say just because of the need he fills, where, like we talked about before, Darnell Nurse could take first time power play no problem, and then you even have Evan Bouchard who probably could slot into that role as a more offensive defenseman, even if it's on power play too. So I think that Larsson would be the guy to get on a better value, where Tyson Barriet is probably outplayed what the Oilers are willing to pay for him, like we've talked about previously. It's just on an open market, that term and that sort of money, teams have way more cap flexibility and are more in need of that guy. And if they're probably going to end up paying more than what the Oilers are willing to pony up for Barry. And with that being said, I just think that there, even though there is replacement options, I think for Adam Larsson and what he does, we're blocking shots and maybe, a more physical game. I think there is a lot of guys that are available to do that. Whereas just for Tyson Barriet, an offensive defenseman, they don't come. They're few and far between, especially right-hand shot. Maybe Dougie Hamilton's the only one this year that is probably that caliber. So if you have the faith in Evan Bouchard that he can take a step forward and maybe be ready to take on a more offensive role, then the clear answer here is Adam Larsson.
Brian, are you in the same boat? Are you looking at Adam Larsson as the guy that you probably can get on the best deal? He gives you a lot of things that nobody else on this team does. Or are you kind of caught up in the Tyson Barriet flashy offense, got you 50 some points? Where are you sitting?
The question is, who's more replaceable? And this is Tyson Barriet provided what this team has searched a long time for in terms with respect to that offensive defenseman. I think everyone hopes and believes Bouchard could be that, but we haven't really seen a whole lot of evidence. And this is not to say that he can't be that, but I mean, he's had such limited opportunity. I think, you're putting a lot on him to think that he can become that guy. And even if he can, it may take him 2, 3, 4 years to get to that point. Tyson Barriet is there right now. That said, Julie made a great point about the contract situation. He is going to get probably some pretty handsome offers on the market. He said he's going to play the market. The Oilers are probably, unless he wants to take a hometown discount so he can stay with this team, he figures, you know what, good deal, good thing going on here. I had a great year, enjoyed myself, probably got a chance to make a run at a couple cups with this team. Maybe he does take a bit of a discount, but he's probably going to go out and even in this flat cap situation, I think, command like Julian said, he may have played himself out of what the Oilers are willing to pay. Adam Larsson seems dedicated to staying here. It seems to be they're so close to getting a deal done and in a range they can afford. So I don't know. I mean, I'm all in on Larsson, and I think that's going to get done. As far as Barry goes, like it's a tough one. It's tough on it. And I'll throw it out to you guys. Like, at what point, at what price and term do you say, okay, we're walking away?
For me, for me on Adam Larsson, if you can get him at the same number or less, I think you consider it. And it probably is going to happen that way. 4 million, 3 years, something like that would probably make sense to me. On Tyson Barriet, anything more than 3 or 4 times 5 is too much. Like, if you can do 3 years, 5 million, I would consider it.
I think he gets offered that.
I know he'll get offered that.
Yeah, I think he'll get more around 6.5.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like,
that's my number.
That's where the Oilers are going to have to set that line and go, you know what, this is what we're comfortable with. We'll do 3 times 5. Maybe we'll do 4 times 5. But we're not doing more than that. And we understand why you came here. We understand what you're looking at doing. This is maybe the one shot you got. And we're okay with that. And if we happen to lose you, well, we knew what we signed up for when we brought you in. So you can't fault him for that, right? And anybody who critiques him for doing what he did needs to take a better look at the business of hockey, because that's just kind of how it works now, right? Like, if you have an opportunity to come in, make the most of your situation, and you happen to hit a home run, which is exactly what Tyson Barriet did, he totally deserves to have the right to go out there. Would it be great if he said and turned around and said, you know what, this is what my plan was. I want to go out and I want to test the market, and I'm really interested in hitting a home run in free agency, but I kind of really like it here. Like, I really like my chemistry. I really like, if that happens, fantastic. I still think people are going to crap all over him sometimes, because that's just what people like to do. But at the same time, I think if you get it at the right number and you get it at the right term, it fits. But I think with Tyson Barriet, for me, more of the concern is, what are you doing around him with the other contracts? Where is that money being allocated? Because I think Larsson doesn't make as big a dent. If you mess up on Larsson's contract, it's not going to kill you. You know what I mean? Like, 500,000 here and 1 year extra, too much there. But in Tyson Barriet's situation, if you screw that contract up, it really domino affects the rest of your blue line, which I think is a massive problem that the Oilers need to try to avoid. So they have to set their own internal line, and they just can't be willing to go above it. As much as it would be nice to bring them back, you just can't go above that, because you have too many other things you have to tackle. You have too much homework you have to do this summer. And for Holland, this offseason is a huge, huge deal. He can really screw it up, or he can hit a massive grand slam. So I think Barriet affects you either way, right? What about, there's some talk about trades and stuff. Like, we'll come back on Evan Bouchard, because I'm interested in talking about him a little bit, where he goes. But I've heard a couple whispers that maybe Seth Jones, I don't believe it to be like a realistic option, because it's a really big fish and a guy who probably wants to play in the U.S. market. But I'll just ask this. I'll throw this out there out of curiosity. Julian, would you have time for Seth Jones if he showed any remote interest in not just coming here, because he's got 1 year left at a really good deal, but he's going to be a free agent right away? If he showed any interest in coming to Edmonton, would you make a play for him?
I would. It would hard to say no to that. I mean, he's one of the better defensemen in the league, especially, I think he's 26 years old. So that's as prime as they come. We've seen what he can do. He's kind of like Nurse. He can play all situations. He can be that number one. He'd be a great asset to pair with Nurse on that top two, on the top line for on the blue line. But I'm not sure what you'd have to give up on an instance like that. It would probably have to be one of Bouchard or Broberg, I would assume, to start and then probably some future firsts involved. And the only way I could see them doing that is if there's an extension in place prior to that deal going down. There's too much risk involved, especially like you said, him wanting to probably play in the US market. I think he's born in Texas, so he'll probably, Dallas right away probably is kicking tires on someone like that to go home and play for his hometown. So, yeah, I think that, you got to do your due diligence at least and check in on him, see what it would take. It's hard to see all these great players kind of requesting to leave Columbus. You kind of start to feel bad for them, and they're losing them left, right, and center. And those are big cornerstone pieces that they're trading away. And they've yet to get a piece back that you kind of say, okay, they won this trade. So it's hard to see that, but I think if you're the Oilers, you kick tires on it. But I think it's a long shot at best.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a long shot. But let's just play for fun here, Brian. Let's just take a look at this and go, okay, let's pretend that he's willing. Let's pretend that he likes the idea of playing with his brother. Let's pretend that he's open to an extension and that he'd be like, I'm not going to rule Edmonton out. Would you, if all those pieces came together and you could make the trade and Columbus is like, yeah, we'll take Evan Bouchard. At this point, would you trade Evan Bouchard as part of a package for Seth Jones? Brian, I'm asking you. Oh, I think he's frozen there.
Sorry.
Oh, there he goes.
Can you hear us now there, Brian?
Yep.
Go ahead. So did you hear my question?
We were musing about what if.
Yeah.
And,
So
but get to the actual question. Yeah.
okay. So if you had the opportunity and you knew Seth Jones was just incoming, playing for his brother, willing to maybe sign an extension, would you trade Evan Bouchard as part of a package for Seth Jones today?
Do they have if there's an extension in place? Yes.
Well, we don't know if it's in place, but we know it's definitely a possibility.
Whew. I probably not. And I love Seth Jones, but I would want that assurance that he's, even if that extension isn't signed, I would want it to be like, yeah, okay, we won't sign it before I am, but I'm confident that I'm gonna stay here for the long haul. I think because I love Seth Jones, but I just, to give him up and if you lose Barry Bouchard, because obviously Barry's not coming back if Seth Jones is coming in here. So if you lose Barry Bouchard and then you can't keep Jones, that's what you're left with in 2 years, then you've messed up.
Yeah, it does pose an interesting. I saw you shaking your head, Julian. Is that an automatic yes? I would absolutely do that deal.
I think I would do it. I mean, I was just going to try and look to see what free agents would be available the season after in case they do miss out on Jones, to see if they can, use that cap space, at the very least, use that cap space to go and replace what they lost. I'm not sure what that would look like, but I think given the situation, if you think that Broberg can take steps forward as well, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to doing that.
Broberg, we have to remember, and I like him too, but he's only 19 yet? I think he's just turning 20. So I mean, none of these guys are really quite ready to step in. I don't know. I mean, I love the idea of bringing in Jones. I would just say, if you're heading into next off season without Barry Bouchard, and then Jones is not re-signing too, would you be okay with that, taking the risk, knowing that could be the situation you find yourself in?
I'm very big on salary cap management, and for me, it would be a no, because I like the idea. I'm sold on Evan Bouchard. I know there's not a lot of NHL experience to tell me that he's going to do anything close to what I think he's going to do, but there's a lot of people saying if he plays a full season, he's a 40 to 50 point defenseman if he gets first play power play time. So I don't know that that'll happen next season. I'd be shocked if it does, but if he's anywhere close, that's a great win for the Oilers. But he's under team control at a very low number for a very long time. Now, he's not the defensive guy that Seth Jones is, and people do want to rag a little bit on Seth Jones's analytical numbers, and I don't weigh too heavily on those like some people do. But yeah, I like the idea of Darnell Nurse and Seth Jones as your right left first pair, because they play like half a game every game. I do like that idea, but I'm not sure that I'd give up Evan Bouchard. I don't know. I just don't see it. And I think if you screw up, you're better to screw up having not given that guy away. That's just my thought on it, right? But Seth Jones is a heck of a defenseman. Like
what if it was Broberg instead of Bouchard?
I would do it. I'm not as sold on
That's
Broberg.
a no-brainer. Yeah, that's a no-brainer for me.
Like, I just think there's a lot more question marks about Broberg. His injury, he's been up and down in terms of his production, his play. That's one of those things, and especially if you still have Bouchard, right? Like, if you give away Broberg, but you still have Bouchard,
doesn't hurt as much.
It surely does not hurt as much, right? Because there's really no guarantee at this point. People are high on Broberg, but there's no guarantee that he's going to be what everybody thinks Bouchard is going to be. Right?
I feel the same way that, like, Broberg to me is the same way as a Liljegren to the Leafs. I feel like the trade value is so high, and he might not pan out the way people think, and you can probably use him as a great trade piece and probably get the best out of that deal.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if it's even a remotely part of the conversation. I don't think it will be. I think Julian pointed out he's from Dallas. He's got a house there. From what we understand, he wants to play in a big hockey market, which would be Edmonton, but not in the Canadian big hockey market. And I'm not necessarily convinced that Caleb Jones is going to be here next year. Like, there's a real possibility he gets scooped up in the Seattle draft. So if that happens, you can throw that whole thing out the window, right? Because why would Seth Jones want to come where his brother's not, if that's the case? Okay, so let's talk just a little bit more about Evan Bouchard. We touched on it. We think he's going to be good. Brian, what do you think? I mentioned people are talking about 40, 50 points. How often would you play him? What do you think he's good for if he plays a full season next year?
Without Tyson Barriet?
Yeah, like, he's your guy, because we're going to assume that Tyson Barriet's going in free agency, which I think he probably will. It would be, I'm giving it 20% that Tyson Barriet turns around and says, you know what, screw this, I want to come back to Edmonton, so let's do that. So I'm going to assume that Tyson Barriet's gone, and that Evan Bouchard, that the Oilers don't necessarily go out and land like a huge high ticket, really top end right-handed defenseman, and Bouchard's going to be that guy on their power play.
I think he could hit 40, 50 points. I don't think it would be next year. If he hits that next year, that's incredible. He's still, he's showing so much. We know what is, he's showing the potential that we thought he would have at every step along the way to this point. And things kind of just got sidetracked this year with him spending, most of the season in the press box when he should have been playing, and obviously victim of circumstances. And that's all, we can't worry about that anymore. But that would be a massive jump for him to step in and deliver that kind of thing. But could he be there in 2 or 3 years? For sure. As for where I would play him in that situation, I would give him a shot right away on the first power play unit and see how it goes. For what pairing I would have him on. Otherwise, really depends on how quickly he can adapt. I think he showed that in the few games he did play this year. But again, it was less than 20, I think. 16, 18, something like that. So I don't know. I just haven't seen enough yet. But I do believe. I'm with you. I believe that potential is there, and that potential will eventually be reached.
Yeah, no, I'm interested to see how much he plays, because I think there's a real
you got to protect him, kind of, don't you?
Yeah, but I also think if you're putting him with Darnell Nurse, that you kind of are, right? Like, in a way, if that's your pairing, and it would be interesting to see if they are really that confident that they're going, okay, you're a first pair guy. I don't think that's happening, but first unit power play, I could see that happening, right? And in that situation, he comes in and he takes over for Tyson Barriet, and then he plays maybe your second or third pair in 5-on-5 situations. I still think he's got, if the Oilers get as many power plays during the regular season as they typically would get, and it's as deadly as it typically could be, which is something Bouchard is excellent at, that point production could be really, really high, and that would be very, very cool. I don't know that you want to count on that, though. I've said the same thing about Kyler Yamamoto. I've said the same thing about Ethan Bear. I've said the same thing about these guys coming off a rookie season that was pretty strong and then taking a bit of a step back. For this would kind of be Evan Bouchard's rookie season, right? Like, he would be eligible for the Calder. And so he hasn't played enough games not to be. So he could have a fantastic year. And I think with Darnell Nurse kind of piggybacking with him in certain situations, he'd be all right. But I think you're right. You need to sort of protect him when you stick him in there. And then you put him in those situations where he's going to excel, and you sort of remove him from the situations that are really going to hurt him. But I think he's ready. Like, I really do think he's ready. I think the Oilers are going to go out and target somebody on that right side. But I think they're comfortable going, you know what, if we just don't happen to land that right shot defenseman that we need, we're okay to go with Bouchard. And that'll be very interesting to see how the fans react to it. I know there's a real hankering for Bouchard to play a lot more, but that's a whole lot different than just saying, okay, he's your guy now. Right.
Yeah.
I think their priority is the forwards, and we talked about it last week, and that's got to be right. What would you do? Would you be kind of like, no, we got to get a forward, like we got to get a right-handed defenseman. We cannot rely on Ethan Barriet and Evan Bouchard. There's got to be a better option out there for us if Barriet doesn't come back.
I think you could start the season like that with those two, and then see how it pans out. And we're back to an 82 game season next year. You've got a long time to figure it out. You could see how things are after 40 games. If you decide you have to make a move to add a piece, you do that. I'd be okay with that. But I'm not going in 100% confident that would be in fact, now that I'm thinking it through, I don't know if I would be. I think you probably would need to eventually add something to complement that group anyway. So it's tough, man. It's tough. I think we just talked ourselves through it here right now.
A little bit. Yeah. Did you, we talked about Seth Jones. Is there anybody out there on the market? And I didn't preload you with this question, and I probably should have, to give you an opportunity to do a little homework and check it out. But is there anybody on the free agent market, anybody out there that you would target, that you like the idea? Like, one of the things I'm thinking about is Seth Jones, say he doesn't come to Edmonton, but he does go to Dallas. I think there's a domino effect that happens in Dallas, right? Like maybe Klingberg gets moved, and then maybe Alexiak gets moved from somewhere else and he frees up and whatever, right? Like, I think there's a chance to like take advantage of the casualty or the collateral damage that comes with Seth Jones moving around, right? Is there anybody on the market that you would sort of target and say, here's a good player that the Oilers should probably be kicking tires on?
For me, sorry?
Yeah, for you. Like, is there anybody that you kind of be like, yeah, that's somebody that I would target for sure?
Not really, because I think the priority is forwards and a goaltender. So I'm comfortable, even if they lose Barry, I'm comfortable with what this team has defensively. I don't think they need to add a piece as much as they need to do as at forward and between the pipes. So that's my priority free agent wise. Pick up a second pairing guy here or there, because you're right. There's going to be a domino effect, and there's going to be probably guys that we can't. And I'm not coming up with anybody off the top of my head here, but there's going to be guys that are left out towards the end of the summer that still haven't signed anywhere, that can be a very good second or third pairing guy. And you can pick up one of those and not have to pay too much, then that's great. But yeah, no, I'm completely comfortable, like I say, even losing Barry, with what this team has defensively. Yeah,
well, you're looking at Adam Larsson and Ethan Barriet on your right side. You're looking at Darnell Nurse, and if Oscar Klefbom is healthy on your left side.
That's a free agent addition right there if he can come back.
Yeah, that's a huge question, right? Oh, Julian's back with us. He lost connection for a little while.
My phone, I got all booted out of my computer.
Oh, it's all good. We were just asking, if you had to stick with the Oilers right and left side, so say you had Adam Larsson, Evan Bouchard on your right, you had Darnell Nurse, a healthy Oscar Klefbom, or you'd have to get somebody else. Would you be comfortable with that foursome?
I think you could do a lot worse if you're any other team. I mean, you've seen other teams kind of struggle to find even guys of that caliber. So I don't think it would be a thing to have that as a top four. Do I think they could use an upgrade? Probably. And it's probably something that Holland will explore moving forward. And I think Klefbom's a big question mark. So I think I would want something a little bit more certain in that spot, or at least someone that's ready to take his place if he can't go in a top four role.
Yeah, I get the sense that maybe we've talked about it last week, and I think we're probably still right in that the forward's going to be the priority. You need at least one top left winger. You need a third line center. You're going to focus on that. You tackle your defense second. If you happen to have to wait until later in the offseason to do it, which is why I'm curious to see whether or not they're going to sign Adam Larsson right away. Because if they don't want to risk losing him, and it'd be small, but there's a chance that somewhere in this expansion draft in the free agency window, they could lose him if somebody comes in with a great offer, that they're probably going to sign him before the draft, which is going to have a whole different story that we'll talk about in a couple of weeks. But yeah, I think that you focus on your defense second, you get your forwards done first, but it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I'm predicting a big year for Evan Bouchard. I don't know if I'm going out of the limb by saying that, but I'm going to say the kid gets 40 points. We'll see what happens and if I'm wrong. Next week, we're going to cover the goalies. So Julian came back just in time for us to say goodbye. But we're going to do the goalies next week. We'll talk about Mike Smith possibly returning. We'll talk about what's going to happen at the draft. We'll talk about whether or not Koskinen's a guy you keep or a guy you trade. And we'll get into all that. For everybody else, we appreciate you coming in. And we'll have Colton back with us next week, I'm hoping. That'd be great. So Brian, thank you. Julian, thank you. For everybody else, hit the like button if you're watching this on Facebook. Hit the notification button on YouTube. Like on Facebook. Give us a big thumbs up. We'll talk to you next week on THW Oilers Overtime.
Cowabunga.